to the United Kingdom. Can you believe it? It's been 5 years since Britain voted to leave the European Union. It was a shock to all involved, and then the politicians had to make good on that decision. 5 years on, what exactly has that decision produced? I'm joined now by our London correspondent, Olly Barratt. Olly, good evening. Take us back 5 years. Why did this question go to a referendum? Why was everyone so shocked at the results?
It went to a referendum in the first place, Sally, because this had been an ongoing debate for years here in the UK, particularly in sections of the Conservative Party. And the then Prime Minister, David Cameron, felt that he really needed to try and move on from that debate, try and end it once and for all, have a generational referendum and put it to bed. He thought he would win the referendum. He was very surprised when he didn't. The other thing that David Cameron wanted to do was try and reform the European Union from the inside. Well, he failed on that as well, and that contributed to the fact that the referendum ended up being his only choice. And the reason that people, I think, were so surprised is that the numbers really didn't show up in the polling in the way that the results turned out. And I think there's also some self-reflection here in London among journalists that perhaps they hadn't got up and around the country enough, hadn't been listening to enough people, that this kind of anti-establishment, perhaps anti-European Union feeling had been swelling, that a decision like this was coming at some point, that there was real discontent that many people wanted to make felt, and that it was missed by large parts of the journalist establishment, but also the political establishment as well.
Of course, we've seen quite a few prime ministers since David Cameron, or David Cameron, then Theresa May, and finally Boris Johnson, who was one of the biggest proponents for Brexit. But in terms of actually leaving the EU, I mean, I think people who are not passionate about this and not living in the United Kingdom have completely lost track of where the process is. So update us. What's been achieved?
Yeah, well, the leaving of the European Union took place around 18 months ago, but then there was a transition period, so it really wasn't until the start of this year that actually the exit from the European Union came to mean very much. So that meant the new trading relationship between Britain and the European Union. So that means rules and regulations have changed. The UK is no longer bound by lots of EU rules and regulations as well. It means if you're a young person, for example, travelling around the European continent is now trickier. You need more paperwork. You don't have complete freedom of movement. It means some extra checks for businesses. But at the same time, the UK government would say it opens up opportunities. The UK is now free to go out and make trade deals around the world, free from the European Union trading rules and regulations, free from that straitjacket, the UK government would say. And by the way, this very week, Dominic Raab, the UK Foreign Secretary, he's on a trip to Asia. He's been visiting Vietnam, Cambodia and Singapore and starting negotiations for the UK to join the CPTPP, which is a trading arrangement, a trade deal in the Asia-Pacific region. So that's what the UK government says is the benefit to all of this. It can go out and strike deals like that on its own with parts of the world, Africa, Asia, it says, that are going to be much more prosperous in the years ahead. But critics of Brexit will say you've lost much more with the change in relationship with the European Union than you will gain with some of these new trade deals around the world.
I think you've partly answered my question, but in terms of the experiences, the lived experiences of ordinary Britons, have they benefited from Brexit or have they not? Or does it just depend on your political point of view? Or has it all been obscured by COVID-19?
That's a really good final point you made there, Sally, because over the last 18 months or so, I think one of the ways in which many Brits will have found an impact on their lives would have been foreign travel, their ability to go abroad to Europe in an easy way, without paperwork, without having to worry about how long they could stay in one country or whether they could then cross borders from one place to another. And of course that has been restricted anyway by COVID-19, so it won't be until the tourism industry really gets up and running again that some people will start to feel those impacts. There were all sorts of scare stories though in the run-up to the vote about mass unemployment, about the City of London completely upping sticks and moving elsewhere, about the the disasters that we'd see on shopping shelves here in British supermarkets, I think it's fair to say the horror stories haven't come true, but there have been difficulties along the way. We've seen real problems for some parts of some industries. Agriculture is really complaining at the moment about the movement of some products like dairy items, for example. The shellfish industry, the fishing industry more widely, is saying it's having a really difficult time getting products into the European Union because of all the extra regulations and the paperwork, the bureaucracy that now has to take place. The haulage industry had particular problems at the turn of the year. So yeah, a lot of people have felt an impact. Others haven't, and many people see sovereignty and that idea of having more control over British laws and British life as an upside that is worth taking on, even if it doesn't necessarily impact on their day-to-day lives in a way that they can really feel.
Well, thank you so much. 5 years on, can you believe it? 5 years since the Brexit decision was made. That's our London correspondent, Olly Barratt.